everyone. Today's video is going to be a beautiful golden Ganesha set. We start off with a slab of 0.6 centimeters in thickness. I smoothen using my fettling knife. I do both the front as well as the back. Now, I didn't have a cookie cutter that was of this particular measurement, so I just used a paper cutout and then cut out the shape. Again, repeating the process of smoothing it. Now this is a really old mold, silicone mold that I had. In fact, I think this was one of my first ones that I bought from a store in Jayanagar, 4th block, and I still have it. It's not in great shape, but I still use it. I just lined it with a little bit of oil and just dunked in a little bit of clay, giving it a good press, making sure I get all the details. This is really cute. So yeah, so that goes in the center of this particular pendant. I'm just drawing a couple of parallel lines just as a marking, because this is where the designs are going to be, and the Ganesha is going to be sitting right in the center of the pendant. Making sure I score both the surface as well as the back of the Ganesha piece which needs to be attached. This is a very necessary step, scoring, and then I am applying a generous quantity of slip. Slip is nothing but a combination of clay and water. It's basically a clay slurry. I attach it, making sure it's sealed well. Once again, a very necessary step. It's just so that especially during firing, if it's not sealed well, there is a good chance that it's just going to come apart, and you'll have basically it will not be together. So yeah, by the way, before this, what you saw me use was a silicone tip brush just to smoothen the edges, and now I'm drawing the designs using my fettling knife. Just in a crisscross manner. This is a short rigid blade that I have, but I think even a pointed knife would help in giving this kind of a design. The pendant, in fact, can be left like this. I actually liked it like this itself. But yeah, I ended up adding those scale-like designs, those fish scale-like designs, and I didn't quite like that, so I just replaced it into this dotted design, which I kind of like, and now I actually like the pendant a lot more. I attached stick beads at the base and Nichrome wire U-pins. The gauge is 24 U-pins at the top. And now these are for the stud part of the jhumkas that I'm going to be making. The slab thickness is 0.3 centimeters. I smoothen this again. I smoothen it using my fettling knife, both the front as well as the back, and using a small square cookie cutter, I cut out a pair. I smoothen this as well. I just divide these into like 4 equal parts. I'm using a small nozzle. You can also use a ballpoint pen refill if you don't have something similar. I'm attaching a pair of small stick beads at the top. Now for the bottom part. This is a conical shaped jhumka. So I'm just using the jhumka mold over here for size reference. The rest of it is going to be made by hand. I'm making this into a round ball. I'm using my thumb, index finger and my middle finger. I'm just pressing it down, trying to make it into a conical shaped jhumka. Using my fettling knife, just drawing a line. Followed by again a similar pattern which was done on the pendant, more like a crisscross or a well, a checkered kind of a design. I'm attaching just one ghungroo bead at the base, attaching the stud to the jhumka part. The Nichrome wire that I'm using for the earrings are gauge 26, and this is for the bead. I'm making this into a coil. I make it into a long coil and I cut out 5 centimeters from each coil, because 5 centimeters, that's typically the length that I require, so that's why I just measure it using a scale. Currently I'm just beating it, or rather hitting it very gently using my wooden ruler. You've seen me do this technique before in I think in another video. Very effective, very neat shapes, and I kind of like that. Just adding a bunch of designs to the bead using my fettling knife. Once again, trying to keep in theme, or rather keep it in sync with the pendant. Using a oil-lined toothpick, making a hole through this long bead. Now that you see the entire pendant and the beads are ready, so we'll let this dry for a few days, and then it's fired in an electric kiln. Once it's fired, we can begin painting and assembling the piece. So it's a beautiful, nice terracotta color that I really like this color. I think I've probably said this like I don't know how many times, but yeah. So I'm going to be using actual Rudraksh beads for these. I did not have the terracotta Rudraksh beads with me. That's why I'm using the actual Rudraksh ones. I'm also using a bunch of 4mm beads. The paint is just black and antique gold. And my regular set of brushes, my liner brush, a broad bristle brush. I am also using a flat brush, and you'll see why I use a flat brush. I begin by applying a base coat of black. Just making sure the paint kind of seeps through everywhere. Now this is obviously for the beads. I'm only painting a part of the beads now in black. Once again, if you're allergic, please don't use this method. Just use a brush and paint each of the beads individually. So if you see all of the long bead, the jhumkas, everything is basically painted in black. Time to wash my messy hands. It's time for gold now. So this is where the flat brush comes into picture. So I'm using gold over here now, gold paint over here, which is undiluted. Very, very necessary, because if the paint is diluted, there is a good chance that it will just seep into the carvings that I don't want. I want the carvings to be, the inside of the carvings to be black. So just, you know, it does require multiple coats. You can also go by the dabbing technique, which I've basically shown in my earlier set of videos. The flat brush for me works pretty well. I'm just covering up the edges, basically covering up the places where there is a little bit of gold that is kind of touched upon. I mean, I didn't want gold on those places, so just covering it up with a little bit of black paint. Now layering a thin coat of paint on my hands. This is for the long bead. Once again, you don't have to do this if you're allergic to paints. You can always use your brush. I repeat the same process once again. Now that the color is a little bit better, I just go on to dab gold paint, again undiluted. This just makes the designs more visible. Adding some highlights with black using my liner brush. I'm again using the dabbing method for the jhumkas. Now for the conical jhumka, the bottom part is done in this manner and the top part is left in plain black. For the beads, now once again, if you're allergic to paints paints on your hands in this manner, just use a brush and paint the beads individually. So I have the gold beads, I have the black beads also ready. Now for the top part, rather the stud part of the jhumka, I'm just using my liner brush and applying gold paint. This is diluted. Just making sure both the studs are opposite. Now obviously when you're dabbing paint, it's inevitable the paint does tend to cross the margins basically. So I'm just covering that up with a little bit of black paint. Now if you see everything is ready, it's time to varnish. This is the product I use. So once the paint has completely dried, I can start varnishing. I've basically, you just shake the bottle really well and transfer a little bit of the contents into a bowl or a container. And for the bead, I'm using a toothpick just to support it. I make sure I don't apply or I don't get any amount of varnish on the base of the toothpick, because if it gets stuck, it's very difficult to remove the bead. Sometimes, in that process, the paint also kind of peels off. So it's just better to be careful at this stage. So I again now have to paint the entire thing, the beads, the jhumkas, everything. This is a time consuming process because I have to do this in parts. I have to first let the paint dry on the front and the sides and only then flip it and do the back part. This is a quick drying varnish, but still, because the coat is a little bit, maybe a little bit thicker, it does tend to, I rather don't risk it. I just let it dry a little extra, especially when it's wet and by chance you end up getting your finger prints on that. It just messes up your whole project. So it's not worth it. Might as well just be patient, let the whole thing dry and then, assemble it. So now everything is dried, the varnish is also dried, it's time to assemble. I have my standard set of materials in front of me. So I have these crimp beads, crimp covers, jump rings, heavy gauge jump rings, and gold beads. This is the cord. I've decided to use gear wire. Rudraksh beads. Once again, if you have terracotta ones, you can try and use those as well. Stud posts. My set of pliers. We first begin with attaching the stud posts. I use E6000. This has been a very reliable one for me so far. I apply it with the help of a toothpick. I let it dry for 3 days before using it. Now the other thing that I generally tend to follow is I use a nozzle like this or a refill or something of that sort and press it down because I think a lot of times what happens is you have to kind of make sure it's pressed down well so that it attaches itself really well, and it's not easy to do that with your fingers because the stud post is pretty sharp. So I think this method helps. So if you see, I've already got a head start on the assembling, and this is the design, this is the pattern in which I wanted it to. I think it looks absolutely beautiful. So we start off with a gear wire, rather a crimp-bead through a gear wire, and then through the pendant, and again through the crimp bead. So I make sure it's nicely pulled. Using my set of pliers, I press it down. I give it a good press, and then I cover that crimp bead with a crimp cover. Gently, because crimp covers, I mean, you don't want to press the crimp cover all in one go. Towards the end of the necklace, I'm repeating the same process. I think I've said this, that how I begin is how I end as well. So that's exactly what I'm doing. It's just that for the bottom part, I had the pendant hook. For the top part, I'm just using a jump ring. Now, one thing that I realized is that this cord, that I'm having on my right hand is actually better than what I showed you initially. So you see that there is a bit of a difference in the color, and I'm not sure if the camera is really able to capture that difference, but there clearly was a difference in color, and I think that this is what went better. So I have decided to actually use this. So I open up the jump rings and I attach this particular cord to this set. The gold on this cord somehow seemed to match exactly with the color of the pendant and the beads and all that. So I know it's a very small difference, but I just, to me it was visible, so I had to make that change. So obviously now that you see the entire set is ready, and this is this is definitely got to be one of my favorite pieces I think I've made recently. I know it uses a mold, and I know the designs are simple, but yet I really like how it's come together. So I really hope you all enjoyed watching this video, everyone. Please do let me know what you think of it in the comment section, and as always, I'll get back to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time.